So, hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We are very happy to welcome you on behalf of Cannes XR and Marché du Film. We are all here to explore new ways to interact and also to present projects and XR works during this special edition of Cannes XR and Marché du Film Online. A little reminder, you can also visit the Museum of Other Realities by downloading the app for free in the Steam store. The Museum of Other Realities is our dedicated Cannes XR space. Here you can experience our showcases organized with our partners. During this panel, you will be able to ask questions to the speakers using the Q&A box in your Zoom session. So now let's give the floor to Daniel Colaianni to introduce the guest who will talk us about immersive world building and how to create environments to engage the user and enhance the story. So please, Daniel.
Thank you. Yeah, no, great. Thank you so much for everyone for joining us here today for this fantastic panel. I am really privileged to be joined by an esteemed group of individuals from the Academy of International Extended Reality. So I'd really like to be able to introduce, first of all, Sadah, Espii, Proctor, as well to this panel today. I'd also like to be able to introduce Josselin, Susana, and Guido as well. I think what would be good is, before we jump into things as well, is I'd like to just ask everyone, I guess, for a little bit of background on themselves. So everyone watching this has a bit of an intro into who they are and why it matters. And then we'll jump into a few of the actual questions around world building with immersive technology. Just a side note as well, we love Q&As, we love questions. So if you want to just use the Q&A function and put any questions in, we'll go through everything, and then towards the end, we'll carve out some time just to answer some of your questions as well. So make sure to use that function. So Sadah, it'd be great to maybe if you could just make a bit of an introduction.
Sure. So hello, everyone. I'm an XR director and sound and media designer based in Brooklyn. I work in theater, podcasts, and immersive experiences. My upbringing in VR is rooted in a performance background through physical theater and device work, as well as dramaturgy, new media dramaturgy, looking at the structure of storytelling. Currently, I work as a designer and interested in creating very playful and surreal environments.
That's great, thank you. Josselin?
Yes, hi everyone. So I'm an XR designer. I have worked for 3 years, more than 3 years in a studio. Now I'm freelancing, and my interest is on interactions, of course, and using new ideas to tell stories differently, to feel immersion for the users, and to have more new devices to work new things and create new ideas. Again, I'm repeating. So I'm based in Marseille, south of France, and I work directly with clients or with production companies with which I work on building the most effective ideas for the clients, which are most often companies, but I also work on cultural museums, XR, and we can speak about that a bit later on.
That's great, thanks. Susana?
Hi, hi everyone. I come from a more conventional audiovisual production background. I've worked in filmmaking, theater, passing through fashion, games, and publishing. And I've always have a passion for transmedia and cross-media, as they allow us to expand our narrative universes so much. And so there's where XR comes in. Since I encountered VR at the time, I started seeing extended realities as a way of evolution for storytelling, and as something that I really wanted to be part of. So
that's great, thanks. And Guido?
So I also come from other audiovisual sector. I'm a filmmaker, so it's more traditional style of 2D storytelling and narrative, and but it's always the XR community. It's full of creative opportunities, and it's a really fun theme to discuss in the early stages of technical development, and how the narrative and other forms of creation will evolve in the immersive space.
Thank you. And without forgetting myself as well, my name is Daniel Colaianni. I'm the Chief Executive of AIXR, which is the Academy of International Extended Reality. We're a not-for-profit organization built from the community to be able to support growth of immersive industries. So thank you for having us here. So look, I just want to jump in, and I just want to ask the first question, because it's the question I actually get asked the most as well. The question is, I mean, and I'll open this up to, you know, our entire kind of panel here. And also I'd encourage that the people watching this at home to have a think about the experiences that they've seen and things like that. But, you know, how do we actually effectively engage users through VR storytelling? I mean, you know, it's a completely different medium to what we're used to. So what are some of your guys' thoughts?
Who likes to jump in?
I think it's you now.
Oh, hey, from France. Yeah, I think first thing that comes to mind for me is that a lot of people want to differentiate from regular media, previous media. Maybe for me, it's and for a lot of people, since the industry is very new, it's we use the same tools in the toolbox of an XR creator. They are the same tools that from previous creators. That means visual design, interaction that we can pick up from the web, and that's what I love the most about it. It's the superposition of all of those aspects together, you know. And just like film, just like print, you have to think about what information do you put first, what kind of emotion do you convey by using that tone, that color, and those are still aspects that are very important as creators, and we need to consider. And if you focus too much maybe on looking at what's new, what's in the very specific area, maybe you forget about that. I would just wanted to open with this thought.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, Espii, you come from a very strong background with audio, right? I mean, how important is audio to the engagement of VR storytelling?
Oh, sorry, I'm not maybe not. You might be confusing because that's not the case.
So I was going to say that was directed towards Espii.
Oh, sorry.
That's
oh,
okay.
No worries at all. So for me, audio should be able to guide someone's experience as much as visual. When it comes to audio being used in an XR space, you know, is it something that is based on what you're already seeing before you? Is it something that reveals something for you? Is it something that causes you to change your focus and be able to pay attention to something else? Is there music? Where is the music coming from? What is your relationship to sound? Is it something that is coming from you or solely within the space? Is it emotion based? Is it just very cut and dry based on what is in front of you. So on the audio side, those are the different things that I look at. When it comes to visuals, I look a lot at space and how people decide to move through it. Is it an experience that is meant to be immersive or interactive? And on a binary, looking at 3 degrees of freedom versus 6 degrees, where you are allowing someone to be able to be inside of an experience, but not necessarily touch and interact in VR possibly? Or is it something that is meant to be interactive where people are engaging with it? Could be augmented reality. Or is it somewhere, you know, in between where VR, AR, and mixed reality decide to be? And from there, then deciding the different elements within an environment that people engage with for how they tell their story.
That's some really great insight. I know that, Guido, we were speaking kind of shortly before all of this, and we were having a chat around some of the different media and how different companies have approached the use of storytelling through I guess, this medium. I mean, what are your thoughts on this?
Yes, I think as Espii is saying, when, you know, you can see really as a storyteller, immersive 360, whether it's interactive or not, it's such a challenging medium to work on in terms of you know, the elements that you have to work on. So even if you take you know, approach to creation in terms of engaging with an existing space, or if it's just a computer generated images, it's always it's a lot of work. It's even in compared to traditional 2-dimensional, even 3-dimensional, you know, you could argue also that I mean, immersive creation, it's also when you're working on it, it's just a bigger frame where the perspective is different.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, I have some examples maybe of videos that we can share with the audience that maybe don't really know much about immersive content, where we can see maybe some content.
Perhaps we've.
What do you think?
Yeah, perhaps we show. I know we won't have time for all of the clips, but maybe one of the clips that might demonstrate, I guess, that engagement side of things within the thing, and we could maybe explore that a little bit as well.
Yeah, sure. Should I'll go to my screen and come back.
Sounds good. I guess while that's loading, and just Susana as well, from your perspective, we've met at lots of different events now, and we've seen lots of different content. I mean, what from your perspective, what makes an engaging story piece?
I think that sometimes people get really caught up on trying the newest technology and get blinded by what they can do, instead of focusing on the core of the narrative, which I think will always be the centerpiece for something to last, as we can see with 2D films. And I think that although we are kind of seeing a fusion of the different art forms, as Espii was talking about, we are seeing something in between. It's not AR, it's not VR. You have the real world kind of seeping into that virtual space. And I think that we are walking towards that that fusion, and that people want that. But at the same time, we should not lose sight of what really matters to the audience and what makes them connect to the content, which is the heart of the story.
Yeah, I think that's very, very important. And Guido, I can see that you loaded up that part of that video now. Maybe if you just talk us through why you selected this clip as well, and why you think it's important from this element as well.
Okay, so it might, you know, from I selected a couple more clips, but since we're a bit short on time, I think it's, you know, The Martian's a great film. The VR experience is a good example of a relatively successful virtual reality production with limited resources in terms of building the experience. And I think Ridley Scott poses some, I mean, it's some audio clips of some very, you know, important points on the difference between 2D non virtual reality content creation and the technical and aesthetical possibilities of VR. There are some more clips, but of course, I think our points of view are important. But who knows who's listening? Okay, I'll show it.
And as that's loading as well, I'll encourage everyone, if they do have questions, we will go through those at the end. So feel free to put them in the Q&A as we speak. Cool, is that one playing?
Yeah, can you see it now?
I can only see it on the behind just the title screen. Here we go, now it's loading. I'm not too sure if it's loading properly. Do you mind if we come back to that afterwards?
Yeah, sure.
No worries. That's fine. I guess if you just stop sharing your screen on that one as well, and that'd be just so we'll switch back to normal view. That'd be great. Thanks. I guess, you know, one of the things, and this is interesting from our team's point of view at the moment, we've been chatting amongst ourselves during this remote times, and we were talking about the fact of, you know, when it comes to XR and these visions, it's very easy to just have a very open imagination, because quite frankly, a lot of stuff is possible when you talk about this technology. But I thought it'd be interesting, just for the benefit of the audience as well, to explore, I guess, some of the limitations and challenges when it comes to world building and VR kind of storytelling as well. I don't know if anyone has any ideas on performance and, you know, I guess how it's important that kind of plays into, I guess, you know, creating an experience that keeps someone engaged, and maybe some difficulties that you've had personally as well. That'd be great to pick up on. Josselin, I'll come straight to you again. You're my go-to guy now.
I'm the first. Okay, no problem. Yeah, you talk about performance. I think that's the main thing the people see about VR, and that's sometimes it's very hard as a creator, because you work, and then at the end you put the headset on someone and all they see is the pixel screen, or the fact that there is steam on the between the eyes and the goggles, or things like that. So we are going to, it's you know, like the website that talks about virtual reality. It's the road to virtual reality. We need to improve the tech. But at the same time, this is something that's been said for the past 5 years all the time. Next year is going to be the year of the good the good tech that will support our industry. I think the buzzword is starting to wear off, and that's a pretty good thing, because maybe true immersive work can begin to stand out on its own and not for the tech, like you said, Susana. There are more and more projects. I think some reports mentioned about 800 projects last year that were immersive. It's more and more, and it's very encouraging. And so as you said, we have difficulties, we have challenges to work on. I think the main thing is that right now the VR we put in the hands of people, when becomes interactive, at least, we need people to stand by on the side because it's hard for people to figure out how to launch the experiences. So my experience, my past work has, we often have someone that has to launch the experience, to put on to put on people the headsets. That's friction and friction and friction over friction, and it's the main thing that bothers me right now. Is if you want to see a movie, you don't have to worry about these things. And for XR, it's a bit. There's a lot of steps between you and the content.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I feel like as creators, we really need to embrace, especially in XR, embrace the limitations that we have. There are good stories and good experiences that can be had regardless of where the technology is at. You know, I come from a theater background where, you know, we may not have the full budget to be able to create, like, you know, mechanical operations, but because of the story, any design elements we add, any performance decisions that are made, any directing points that are created, they all serve the story. And we trust that our audience has an imagination to be able to fill in the blanks. You know, again, whether something is very hyper realistic or something that is more poetic and metaphorical, regardless of either one, you are still trusting your audience to believe that what they are seeing is real. They're suspending their disbelief for that moment that they're in your story. You know, I like to, one example I like to give is with Shakespeare and The Tempest, you know, how Shakespeare and his group, his troupe, they would perform on the stage, and, you know, there wasn't any mechanical technology that we have today to create this Tempest, but through the language, through any costumes that they had, through whatever they could put together, and through the strength of everyone's storytelling, and then also really being connected with the audience, everyone is able to conjure up this tempest. It's understood that this tempest is happening. Now we get to something like XR, where, you know, we have the ability to create every single element of this tempest. And I think sometimes that gets us carried away, where if we don't have it to the exact pixel, then people can't possibly believe it. And I think that whatever limitations we have, if we're able to create every pixel of it, or if we're on an 8-bit type of life, either way, really focusing on how we're crafting it and how it's serving the story, and trusting that the audience will be able to, if you want to give them a good experience, be willing to go on that journey with you. And then, you know, as the technology grows, we can continue to move with it without pushing back.
Mm-hmm. Guido, I mean, you're in a VR experience. You're sitting there. There's lots of stuff going on around you. I mean, how on earth do you use that environment to your advantage without overwhelming the user?
So I had another clip to share, which is a really fun storyline and visual. You know, these ones for the audience that isn't very familiar with VR. They can see the Batman Lego 360 Immersive experience in YouTube. And it's a very successful, I mean, that was like such great IP, where you have an easy, you know, home run in terms of the content. So they did a pretty good job in, you know, immersive mise en scène. And of course, you have this criteria that applies a bit from the filmmaker's perspective of foreground and background. So so that's you know, the main, since it's from a single user perspective, image creating. That's a key element. And then another one, of course, is you know, crafting each experience on a you know, space by space sort of like form. So like in a traditional script, you work on a structure, work on your acts, and then on a scene by scene you know, approach. I guess the main you know, criteria for immersive storytelling is focus on a space by space approach.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, yeah, that again, I think some great insight there. And I think, Susana, I was going to ask you, I mean, you know, putting performance aside, I guess, I mean, what are some of the actual instant things, I guess, that would break immersion for you as part of the story? And I guess, how do we work to maintain that through the environment?
I think that when we were talking about the technical issues before with Josselin, that really is one of the most crucial things for me as a user. And I think that, for example, when we are at a festival, although we have the time constraint of wanting to see a lot of different things, we are kind of more open to give experiences more chances. Even, okay, this headset isn't working, but I'll try the other and the other one, because I know this is a one in a lifetime opportunity. This is a premiere. It's something that it isn't out there yet. But at home, if I encounter something like that, I'll just move over to the next one, although I have more time, and probably won't get to it until I remember many weeks after. So for me, the technological part still is one of the most breaking points, the most important here, the most crucial ones. But in terms of story, I think that you really have to be able to create something that doesn't overwhelm the user, but also be careful just to everything that you put into that world means something to the narrative, is essential for the progression of that story. And if you do that, even if there's something a little bit extra, if the main thing you're putting all the details in and shining the light more, even is the main storyline, I think that the audience will forgive you a little glitch here or there and keep focused on the main thing.
Mm-hmm.
But,
I think that hardware challenge is an interesting one, and I guess we all keep coming back to that at the moment. But I'm interested just to open-end it. I mean, maybe Susana, you might have some thoughts on this, or anyone else within the panel. But I mean, how do we actually get around some of those actual challenges with the hardware, though? I mean, what are our workarounds while we are still waiting for some of the hardware to catch up?
Well, I think that we can work with that constraint. With, as Espii was saying, we have to maybe tone down our imagination and the need to try everything. And okay, we have these limitations, so let's create inside this box and make it explode as much as it can. For example, there's a game called Infinite Hotel, and as it works with the idea that we can't move around too much, so you are on an elevator and you explore the space vertical, because there it's infinite. And I think that it was a very clever way to approach, and the creators were talking about how the actual constraint of, okay, the people doing this at home might have problems with, I might break something, I don't have such a big room for it. And it's an example of how having limitations can spark your creativity. And I think that's a little bit more, again, you focus more on the story you really have to tell, what elements what are the bare bones of your story, and how you can put them in a easy way for the hardware you have at hand. Even if you're already thinking of scaling up in the future, right now, what is the safest option for you to engage the user? Yeah.
Josselin, I'm going to pose you a question that I get asked all the time by new filmmakers, filmmakers who I guess are very well experienced, but it's the question of whether or not to go kind of in terms of style and how this affects your story. I guess, you know, cartoon type style through to actually realistic type style. And, you know, like with breakthroughs in, you know, photogrammetry and being able to scan whole environments within and being able to now interact with those environments, and I guess taking it less away from a 360 camera style and actually within a game engine. I mean, what's the right way to go?
Yeah, I think that's a topic that I'm very passionate about this topic. There is so many interesting things going on about the way we virtualize the existing world and not make something digitally. We can talk about volumetric video, we can talk about many aspects, but I think what can be interesting doesn't have to be that way, but what can be interesting in doing a VR experience that is based on real life filming is to add on a layer of interactions to it, and those are the things that I'm trying to do in my projects, because I find it really interesting since you're putting someone in a place that they don't know, and you put them in a position that they can experiment with the world. It's very interesting for them to be able to touch and grab things, and so the fun I get in my work is to combine these sort of video game techniques and combine them with movie making practices, and the combinations of the two are really interesting. In my opinion, we have the possibility today to add on layers of 3D on top of 360 films, and that makes very interesting things for people. If you have a phone that rings and it's really filmed into the experience and you can just interact with it. What if you can talk to people? What can we expect from future technologies? What can AI bring also into the equation? It's a lot of prospects are possible, but yeah, it's I think the realistic approach. If you want to choose a style, you don't have to stay into I really loved the film that was on a We Are One, that was about moving to a new place, that was in a taxi, and they did all of that with puppets. It was very, very, very beautiful to watch, and it was all done in stop motion. I think it was called Passenger. So my thoughts are going all the way, but I think we don't have to stick to realism to have a good story. What we already said today is what are you conveying as information and as emotion. That's the thing we need to work on the most by building those worlds.
I think it's fascinating. I think hearing about overlaying, I guess what you're saying, like overlaying digital onto traditional 2D film and how we're going to do that. And I think that's a really, really interesting aspect. I think this is such a fascinating question that I'd like to ask everyone on the panel actually their thoughts on it. I mean, how does that environment really affect you know, the story at the end of the day. And I don't know, Espii, if you have some thoughts on that.
Can you clarify, like in what way? Can you give an example?
Yeah, I guess, you know, when we're in an environment within VR, I mean, does it need to be hyper realistic? Does it need, can it be, you know, almost just a gamified thing, or are we losing something by taking away what we have from traditional film, where it's, you know, real actors and real people and things like that, I guess?
I don't think it takes away at all. I think that, you know, regardless of whether it's hyper real or it's a more gamified version, you know, to what level of to what level do you want an audience to understand what their relationship is? Are they playing themselves in a space and they're just, you know, seeing everything through their own perspective, or are they in an environment where they're now playing, you know, an archer or a hunter? I think it was one of the early games. It was like a space pirate game, and it was fun being able to play that because you know at first you're in the headset and you're, you know, you see the spaceships coming in and you're targeting them. But what ended up happening as I watched other people play is that people really got into it with their body. You know, all of a sudden it's like now you're in a movie, you're ducking, you're diving, you're, you know, doing weird angles, you're posing. You know, you're no longer just being yourself. I'm no longer just Espii playing a game that is, you know, knocking out space pirates. I'm now like Espii, the space pirate hunter, and now I'm, you know, I'm a hero in this story. And so my imagination can tap into what would I do as the hero in the story, and I fall into character because the environment is gamified. Whereas on the other hand, if I'm watching a documentary, I'm watching Clouds Over Sidra, I am not Espii the space pirate hunter. I'm Espii who's listening to stories about the refugee crisis. And so I don't feel like I have to play into a role. I can really look at things and reflect on how I relate to this topic and how I understand this topic already or don't, and what I could do about it. And so my relationship with the story changes. And because my relationship with the story changes, what I take away from it is very different. And that again just depends on, you know, how I'm bought into that experience.
Again, some fantastic insights there, and I don't know if kind of Guido, if you have some thoughts on that particular area as well, to pick up where Espii left.
Yeah, I think you know, when on the one hand you have there are so many paths to content creation, and at the same time compared to 2D media, the workload is so much, the, you know, the audiovisual creation is so demanding that you know, my advice is you know, work on the script, you know, find a way to previs by pencil, paper, colors, work on a good mood board, and let you know, days and nights of the creative process individually or with a team before you start, you know, bringing to the computer the next steps of the creative process. So, and then the good thing is, you know, with Unity, with Unreal, you have these, you know, creative tools for content creation that are, you know, in terms of the availability of the technology, very democratic. And you know, I think the biggest challenge is to be really, you know, able to go through the creative process with inspiration. I think that's the main thing.
Yeah, no, I think, you know, especially that understanding that you're not a lone filmmaker sometimes as well, and then being able to work with a team on that, I think that's very important. I just wanted to add as well, I know that some people within the audience are asking that they'd like to see some of these clips or the links to them at the very least. So what we will do is we'll be able to put them in our Slack channel that we have. So, and I know a lot of the panelists here are actually in our Slack channel as well, so you might be able to message them and chat with them. But if you wanted the links, and we'll put them in there, so all the clips that we've talked about, even things like Passenger as well, we'll put it in the Slack channel. If you want to find that, that's just aixr.org/Slack. And then you can join that, and we'll have all the links in there for you that we've discussed within this panel as well, and have a chance for open discussion afterwards. So I know that we're one topic that I really do want to cover, because it's probably my most favorite area when we talk about this wonderful technology that we have. And I guess it's about the fact that if we were to do this talk again in 10 years time, how would it be different? What would we be talking about? And Susana, I'll open that up to you to begin with.
When Espii was talking about when you're watching a 360 video, you're more passive. I was thinking of an experience from Luisa Valencia called Afterlife, where the audience is actually moving the story towards different paths, depending on where they are focused on, in which character they are focusing. So it's a kind of choose your own adventure, but without the person actually being aware that if she lingers towards one person, she will actually follow them, and the story will end differently. And I think that in 10 years from now, we will actually be looking more and more into that subtle way of interaction, of where you can either really be the character and embody the space pirate, or whichever character you are playing, and just be that person fully, and with all technology that's coming, that will be even more physically challenging. But also something a little bit more subliminal with things like this one, with giving the user agency to actually shape the story, but in a subtle way. And I think that will be kind of when the technology starts to hit a more mature state, where we want to experiment, but we also have this kind of middle ground where creators are finding some safe space with ground rules and a common language that is already kind of sprouting about. But 10 years from now, I really believe it will be just pop a headset or glasses, something different, but much more intuitive. That's what where I see this going.
I think you've touched on something pretty interesting there as well, which in my opinion could be a completely different talk and panel just on its own, which is I think it's going to be harder to define what is a VR film or experience. I think as we go along, we're already struggling with that at the moment. So I think that's something important that you just touched on there. That, could be a whole different talk on its own.
Yeah.
So I'm conscious for the fact that we've got quite a few questions kind of within here, which we're going to get through. I'm going to just start opening up to questions in just a minute. But Josselin, I noted down some stuff earlier, because you started talking about volumetric and AI and all these things. I guess in 10 years time, that's going to be pretty significant to how we tell the story.
Yeah, we can only imagine. And of course, people in 1900 were imagining a lot of things about 2000, and perhaps in 10 years it won't be that much different. But from a creative standpoint, we can only imagine, what if we bridge all those technologies we hear about every day? What if we bridge artificial intelligence and the progresses of computer vision that are made from ARKit, ARCore, What if we are able to what if the world, the immersive world you're put in, can react to everything you do, everything you touch or say, or that's mind-blowing. And we haven't talked a lot about it, but the augmented reality creation is very interesting as well. We have the potential to have something much, not to put comparisons, but we have a deep relation to the world layer as human beings. I'm using the phrase world layer, but what I mean is your relationship to the world is something that's so deep inside of us that using it as a tool to tell stories is very interesting. And maybe we will see some kind of some use of a volumetric video with augmented reality, with artificial intelligence, not in every experience, of course, not in everything that will be immersive, of course, but some people will have the budget to make all that together. That will make experiences very, very deep. And what if volumetric video can allow us to walk inside a filmed environment that's just incredible, and using the world around us as a tool, it's just amazing. We can only imagine, especially with AR kits that's been released just a few days ago. The devices we have can recognize where we are, what we look at, and the possibilities are endless. And maybe what I think, what I wanted to say as well is maybe in 10 years' time we will stand free from the talk about tech and devices. It will more be about those topics we have today about smartphones or tech. What about security? What about privacy? What about making good ethical tech? That's a good concern as well for virtual and augmented reality. Those are all topics, accessibility, diversity, you name it.
For sure.
Those are all topics that are very interesting as well, and that are already being talked about.
Yeah. Well, I know that we've got a ton of Q&A, and I know that we're not going to be able to get through every single one of them. So I'm going to ask my wonderful panelists to be able to, I guess, quick fire some answers to these questions. So I'm just going to shout out some questions that we have here, and then hopefully if any one of my panelists just want to just jump in and grab it, but just keep it short and concise. We'll do the bullet point ones. So I got one here. I'm not even going to begin to pronounce anyone's names because I am absolutely terrible at that. But I've got one here, which is, what are the practice limitations of the use of light when creating a narrative transmedia experience across VR/XR?
Well, I can give you a positive a note on those limitations. That it's the use of darkness, black shadows, and just like in 2D, it's a very good element to guide the visual, the spatial storyline. And it makes it less of a it's less work. Less less pixels.
Okay, great.
And it's a good tool.
Okay, great. So I am going to speed through these ones just so we get as many answers through it. But again, I would just like to remind everyone, we can continue on some of these conversations if you have further questions, and you can ask all of our panelists here through the AIXR.org/Slack channel, where we'll be able to help you answer some of these questions. So I've got one here. Kevin, you have a really easy name for me to pronounce. That's great. I am a filmmaker from a developing country. How affordable is XR? Will it remove the quality barrier difficult to achieve for filmmakers who cannot afford a production budget to travel? So that's the first question from Kevin.
I think that the the easiest form of entry, while it's still a challenge, would be 360 cameras and augmented reality, simply because you're able to film what you have without having to generate an entire environment on a computer. And then in the case of augmented reality, you're able to work on a smaller scale and place things on a smaller scale, whether that's you know, the size of objects, the number of pixels that they have, or even just audio that's placed within a space.
That's great, thanks. I've got another one here. Sorry, Kevin, if we have time, I'll come back to your second question. We've got another one here, which is, I'm a production designer for film. What is a good program to start learning XR modeling to get the basic ideas down that I could then pass on to the VFX team for further development?
Unreal Engine.
That's great. I think there's one for modeling as well. I mean, from my experience, from some of the stuff we've seen, is anything that you can start designing in from even from tilt brush and things like quill and things like that really open the door to even novices being able to do 3D modeling. I don't know if anyone on my panel has experience of that.
Yeah, there are a lot of tools that are coming out, and if it's about choosing software, you have lots of options today. I agree with you. Unreal is the best, the more qualitative options, but of course you have the lowest, the low range as that can help you. Tilt brush, Tivoli, A-frame, Metaverse, or maybe even things for AR like Adobe Aereo can help you model things, or at least place them and see how they look in AR. And yeah, I'll stop there.
I know Blender even came out with an update recently to support kind of XR kind of natively as well. So that's also a good shout at the moment. I've got another one here, which is for VR experiences that you showcase at an event or festival, as opposed to at home, what are your best practices or advice for using physical spaces /sets /props to immerse and onboard the audience into the story? And also something about offboarding. But so Susana, I think you briefly touched on events and the differences within those environments, right?
Well, I think when you're at an event, or producing for an event, with any event in mind, you have two options. You are either thinking of streamlining a streamlined creative process, so you go through the festival, but already thinking that it will go towards an online store and it will just need a tweak or two, or you use the festival as a moment where it's a full-on experience and you can make it a real performance. So you can use real dancers, live music. It depends, of course, on your budget and everything. I won't even touch there, but it is the place for you to actually go in and explore that thin boundary between the virtual and the real. And if you want to have your audience actually touching a furry thing when they are seeing an animal or feeling the smells, that's the place where you can experiment the most, is in a festival. But of course you have to adapt to the constraints, so I would advise to tailor your experience to each festival you really want to be a part of.
That's great, thank you. And I'm really sorry for anyone else who had some questions here. We're not able to get through every single one of them. But again, put them into aixr.org/Slack and we'll be able to answer some of those there for you. So this was Espii, Josselin, Susana, Guido, and myself, Daniel, from AIXR, and we'd really like to thank everyone for watching this and joining us today. And thank you again to our friends and partners at Cannes XR for being able to host this today as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, bye.